Just going to record today's session. So again, for those of you that are on playback, I'm welcoming you to our Wednesday Leadership Roundtable, which is talking about all things humanizing transformation. And today we're talking about the world of small. Small is beautiful, small is not slow. And there's a beautiful quote here, you know, absolutely fantastic, by Margaret Mead, which is, never doubt that a small group of people, thoughtful, committed citizens, can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. There is a huge amount of depth behind that quote, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. You know, a small group of purpose-driven human beings are enough to move mountains, and we really need to understand that. So incredibly important. So what I'd like to do today is I just want to introduce us to 3 areas where we in our work help leaders, change agents and organizations understand where small is beautiful. And when we talk about small is beautiful in our framework, we're actually we use the phrase power of one. So one is for us, you know, the biggest, the smallest whole unit. And when we're thinking about the power of one, we can think about it in 3 ways. And these are the 3 things that I want to introduce you all to today. We can think about it in terms of ourselves. We are one person. How can we influence and bring change about? So where's the power of one in us? Then talk about quantum. So quantum in terms of tiny change for big impact. And what does that look like when we're designing transformation? So how we bring small into the design of transformation, which is not about slow. And then thinking about singularity. And singularity is probably the most logical area where the power of one comes into play, but not always so. So what I mean by singularity is really just simplifying things down and, you know, just thinking about getting rid of the waste around decisions, data, change and transformation. So those are the 3 things that I want to talk about today in the next wee while. So the first one is who we are ourselves. And it doesn't matter whether you are not directly involved in change and transformation, whether you are leading change and transformation, or whether you are, you know, a leader in an organization, but not necessarily, you know, a sponsor of a program around change and transformation. It's irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant. If we start to reconcile that we ourselves are transformers, we ourselves can humanize transformation, then it opens up a huge amount of power. So how we show up, the words that we use, the actions and behaviors that we choose to display and deploy in our daily practice as leaders and change agents is super important, because what we bring to change and transformation is the 3 T's. If we are able to bring tiny little essences of the future into the reality of our daily moments, into some of the language that we use, into the how of our practice, tiny, what we are able to do is we are able to just help others trust in the future. Because it's almost like they can touch it and feel it. And the future is always so intangible for people. And it's so scary because it's so far away from my norm. If we as leaders are able to just bring tiny elements of it into our practice, into our narrative and our words, oh my goodness, are we able to support trust? And trust is a massive contributor to the success of transformation, bringing humans on board. The other thing that who we are as a leader, who we are as a change agent, the other thing that it is important to understand as well is truth. And what do I mean by that? Well, if we are bringing or exploring or experimenting with little elements of the future in our daily practice now, in the devices that we use, in how we speak, positive, not negative, in the words that we're using and normalizing in some of our habits. What we're doing is we're actually bringing in the reality of the future into now. We're making it true. We're bringing truth. And what that truth gives us is data. Gives us data, which means that we can say to somebody, yeah, well, I'm doing it and it's working over here. Well, this is what I'm doing, and this is what my experience is. So in our own practice, it gives us fact, it gives us truth, it gives us data, and that data we can share. The other thing that is important as well is that it allows people to stick to us, to recognize a little bit of what they might want in themselves, and they start to connect to us as a tribe. So what's beautiful about this is that it creates a sense of followership. So if, again, we're bringing a tiny little essence of the future, a tiny little bit of it into who we are today, people will start latching onto that. And we will start to foster and enable the creation of a tribe and a new community and a sense of followership in others. And those people that stick to us, those people that start to want to be around us, our tribe, those are the people that we want to bring on the journey with us as the superpowers, as the champions of change and transformation, as the early adopters, because they're seeing something in us that they like and they recognize, and it motivates them and they want more of it. So they want to be around us. There's a stickiness. So these three elements are really important for us to think about in how we show up in our own practice in daily life, because trust is a huge enabler of success. Truth brings data, which means that we can, we can share with people some facts and some data around what that future looks like now. And 3, tribe, stickiness. We will start to bring people that are the early adopters of transformation closer to us, because they will be attracted to us based on that. And that's the creation of tribe. So these 3 elements are so important. Wow, that's just you. That's just one thing, right? One person can move mountains, and bringing those 3 things into reality, just you, is super important. And if we're able to coach and mentor one other person to do the same, and then another person in another place to do the same, can you imagine how the ripple effect of humanizing transformation can very quickly happen with just small focus, which is on one person, you. Really, really, really important and cool stuff. So that's you. But the next element is the principle of Maya. And I don't know how many of you have ever come across Maya before, but my goodness, it is so, so powerful. And I was with a group of leaders yesterday on an MBA, and we were talking about Six Sigma and lean and continuous improvement and all of that beautiful stuff. And they totally get it. They totally get that stuff. And then I said to them, do you know that we can also use this concept of tiny, tiny, tiny little shifts in the design of the future? We can use this same kind of way of thinking in transformation. And they were like, what? Surely not. And I said, yeah, actually, yeah. And some people in the advertising world have been doing it since the 1950s. And this is how. So just to introduce you to the Maya principle, first introduced to the world, and actually to the world of advertising, by a guy called Raymond Loewy early in the 1950s. And what he recognized that if you understand where a human's normal, familiar habitat is, so the familiarity, the words that they're always using that they're comfortable with, the behaviors and the habits that they're comfortable with, that they repeat in their daily life. If you understand, if you can observe that, if you can map that, you've got what is acceptable to them, because that's their normal, that's their familiar, beautiful, cozy life. Once you understand that, then what you can do is, if you know what your beautiful future vision is, you can backcast, you can reverse engineer it all the way to a point that just gets to the edge of that normal, beautiful, comfortable life of the human being that you've been observing. And you can just take them and stretch them just towards that future, which is most advanced. You don't do it too much that they break. You have a nice little balance between the two. So the Maya principle is most advanced yet acceptable. And that allows us to bring the future into the daily life of a group of people, or a large group of people, very similar to how we might see it in our own practice, as I mentioned earlier on in the first one. But this is when we're designing transformation for others. So let's look at it. So right in the middle of that bullseye dartboard there, you can see the zone of familiarity. So I would say to you, if you're in the world of change and transformation at the moment, how are you? And if you're not, how could you observe and start to measure and gather data around the zone of familiarity for your people, for the humans in your system? What is their natural habitat? What are their little habits? What does their cave look like in the IT department? What does the cave look like in the learning and development department? What are their norms? What are the beliefs that they bring in? So just think about that, because they'll be different all over the organization. There'll be different caves of human beings lighting their own fires, telling their own stories at night, keeping themselves warm. So understand those zones of familiarity for the humans. And then what we can do is we can be absolutely clear about what our moonshot is when it comes to the future. So if you've got a vision for your transformation, great. But that vision for the transformation you have for your future needs to be articulated or visualized as a human being. So at the moment, if you've got a vision for transformation, if you've got a transformation strategy, great. But if I was to ask you to draw a human being in the future, a day in the life of a human being based on that strategy in that future, would you be able to do it? With their habits, with their norms, with their beliefs in the future? Could you do that? And if not, then that's what you want to do. So have some conversations around that. And once you've got that picture, which is not going to be absolutely, it's going to be like a Monet, it's going to be like lots of dots, it's not going to be a photograph, it's not going to be that clear, but you need to be able to visualize a human being in the future, not just your narrative and your bullet points about your strategic targets and all of that. No, you need to visualize a future human. And once you've got that, you've got what we call a zone of possibility. And all you need to do then is just work backwards. And you work backwards based on your future humans' habits, language, norms, beliefs. Work all the way back until you're just at the edge of where your current humans are. And that's what you design. And that's what you communicate. Because a lot of the time what we do is we communicate the big vision of our future and it breaks people. There's a chasm between that and where they are now. So even in our communication, what we want to do is we want to stick to the rule of Maya and not break it. And we design most advanced and yet acceptable. Now, the beauty of this is this. With time, where we've just stretched people to, Maya becomes the zone of familiarity. And then what do? Do exactly the same thing again and again and again. So all of a sudden what you do is you have tiny little shifts. And as soon as people become familiar with it, you introduce a little bit more stretch. They become familiar with that, introduce a little bit more stretch. And the beauty of Maya is human beings do not evolve or change like the deployment of technology. It's not an A-B point that is a straight line, a diagonal. It's not, it's a J curve. So if you do and perform Maya enough times, you'll get to a tipping point. And that tipping point will be where the individuals start thinking for themselves. They start wanting this for themselves. They start doing this for themselves, which is absolutely beautiful, because you'll get to that tipping point of they now understand what they look like, how they belong, who they're going to be in that future. And once they've got that clocked, they can follow this journey on their own, and they don't necessarily need so many of these nudges themselves. The most amazing example of the use of Maya in our consumer world is, of course, Apple. And if you haven't heard this story, you probably naturally know it, but you've never really, you've never had the opportunity to think about it in this way. But if you think about, June, July 2007, when the iPhone launched, that wasn't the beginning of a journey. That was, oh my goodness, that was the tipping point. That was the tipping point for Apple. But up until that point, they had been stringently applying the rule of Maya to the way that they were designing and cultivating people's evolution in terms of habit and norm and belief. When they designed the iPhone, they went out to observe and understand that zone of familiarity that I mentioned. They looked at people. They looked at people in their caves, in their normal daily lives, and they observed their habits and their beliefs and what they were doing and what they were saying. And they recognized that a phone to communicate and live their life in a mobile environment it just wasn't part of the zone of familiarity, but something was. And of course, that something was the Sony Walkman. That was already in the zone of familiarity. So what did they do? They designed to Maya the iPod. They knew that they were moving towards the iPhone, but instead of launching the iPhone, which would have broken the rule, they launched the iPod. And that first iPod that they launched into market was so similar in terms of its features and functions to the Sony Walkman. It was push button, not touch screen or anything like that. It just was beautifully on the edge of the zone of familiarity. And then they designed, and then they designed, and then they designed until they got to that lovely tipping point. And the iPod that was in the consumer world just before the iPhone launched was touch. It had no press buttons in it. It just got to the point where they were able to tip over and launch the iPhone. That is arguably one of the best kind of examples of consciously using the principle of Maya to evolve the mindset and the behaviors of a group of human beings. And this is at a global level, right? Remember, Maya is used still extensively in the advertising and consumer world. Coke continuously used Maya. If you look at the evolution of the Coke logo, the Coca-Cola logo, you see the evolution of it. It is always adhering to the law and the principle of Maya. And if you have a look at the beginning of Coca-Cola's journey as a brand and how that brand has evolved over time, it is amazing. Nike have done very similar. So from a branding perspective, this concept, getting people to a tipping point and actually using the principle of Maya, is daily life. Why don't we use it in the world of change and transformation? No idea. But there we go. There's a thought for you all. And what is lovely is that, you know, we are able to then enable people to start to take ownership of their own world, their own evolution, their own place in the future of change and transformation, which is brilliant. And this is a slide that I often share with people when I talk about the power of one in transformation. I see that, Tom, you've probably seen this slide before, but it's a really, really, really easy slide for us to get our head around using Maya, backcasting from the future, because more often than not, when we're thinking about small, tiny changes, we're usually in the world of continuous improvement. And if you're thinking about continuous improvement, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people everywhere taking, you know, 1% improvements or tiny improvements in any area of their business or, you know, whatever it is. And that's great for continuous improvement because we're continuously improving our current state. So it doesn't matter what element of our current state we're improving, as long as we are improving it. So that's where we're kind of taking different steps in different directions from the current state out. That's the left-hand side of this slide. It's brilliant, perfect. It does, great for changing where we are today. But when we're moving into the world of transformation, we do not want to improve what we're doing now. We don't want to make what we're doing now better, faster, and smarter. We're trying to get people to engage in a future vision. So what we want to be doing is we want to be making sure that every time we're taking a tiny step, all of them are orientating towards the future, which means that we've got to design from the future back to now. So the difference between improvement and transformation when it comes to tiny shifts is this: continuous improvement is when we make now better, faster, and smarter. Transformation is where we take tiny steps all in the same direction and we're designing from the future. So it's not about now better, faster, and smarter, because all you're going to do is just get a faster horse. What we're doing is we're bringing tiny elements of the future into today to prepare people to open a car door and drive off into the sunset. So it's a real mindset shift in terms of understanding the Maya principle in vis-a-vis continuous improvement versus transformation. I want to move on to quantum now. So I've talked very much about, you know, the power of you and this concept of Maya principle for designing change and transformation. But I also want to introduce this, what we call quantum, to you. And quantum to us is the technique. Quantum to us are the tools that we use to either help ourselves transform or to help large groups of human beings transform. And essentially, all we do is break down your brain into two halves. So you've got the half of your brain that is unconscious and half of your brain that is conscious. And 99% of change and transformation only focuses on your conscious brain. Reasoning, decision-making, actions. Once it's done, it's done. All of that stuff is the conscious practice. And that is great because it's just over half of our day. But we're missing out on nearly half of our day that is unconscious practice. And if we are able to seed transformation, seed change into this unconscious area, what we're doing is we're creating lasting change. Because if you can create a habit in help and support somebody to adopt a new habit, that habit in their unconscious practice is sustainable because it's repeatable and it's consistent. You can get somebody to do something once, but you can't guarantee they're going to do it again. You can get somebody to make a good decision once, but you can't guarantee that they're going to make that same decision again, right? So you want a balance between unconscious design in your transformation, getting people habitually, unconsciously doing things, as well as getting people consciously doing things differently. So you want a balance of both of those things because the unconscious practice gives you longevity. It gives you sustainability. So once you're out of the project and program, these people are still going to be doing those unconscious things that will be supporting some of their conscious change. So you really want to make sure that you're practicing both of those things. When we talk about conscious change, conscious decision making, what we have is we have this little technique which is called a power up. And it's great actually, because when we're working with a team of people, we get them to what we call our mental gym. So we do some mental stretches. So think about your brain as a group of muscles, and we're going to go to the gym and we're going to do some reps. So we have what's called the power up, which is the mental rep. And it's pretty cool. And it's a little bit of serious play. It's a bit of gamification, but it gets everybody going. And what you've got here is you've got the simplest form of helping people on a daily basis to engage their conscious brain, their conscious decision making in a transformative way. And all you do is just give people the concept of every day at the beginning of the day, power your day up. Power your day up by 1%. Make your day better by 1%. And you can do that in 5 different ways. And it's up to you how you do it. Or as a group, you might want to just, focus in on one of these and every day work together as accountability buddies to just focus in on, 5 days or 10 days doing a challenge on one of these power-ups every single day. It's entirely up to you, however you play it. But the key thing is really getting all 5 of these power-ups understood and experimented and practiced by people on a daily basis. This is your conscious brain, right? This is your conscious brain going to the gym every day. So your conscious brain can go to the gym every day to do 5 different exercises. You can exercise your effective power muscle. And what you're doing there is you're just increasing your productivity. So increase your productivity mental muscle just by adding 1% to your productivity every day. And that can be as simple as, oh my God, every single day, I'm just like, how many emails come through? So one day, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a tiny little rule into my email, into my Outlook, my Office 365 Outlook. And it's just going to be all of my emails from Tom, put them into that into that folder. So I don't see them, but I can see that there are unread messages from Tom because he's always emailing me. I've picked on you there, Tom. I didn't mean to do that, but there you go. I can see you. So that's the only reason why. So that is a tiny little power up. Once it's done, it's done. The key thing about a power up every day is it's tiny. It's 1%. Once it's done, it's done. And if ever you've gone shopping and you've walked into a shop and there's a rail by the door and it says, once it's gone, it's gone. That's what we're talking about here, right? You just do it and then it's done. And that's the effective power up. The same with the experience power up. And the experience power up is a beautiful one. And I absolutely love it. It's where we add richness to our life. It's where we recognize that we're a human or we recognize somebody else as being a human. It's beautiful. So how does that 1%, how does that figure out? Well, actually, believe it or not, my power up this morning was an experience power up. And I sent an email to somebody that I haven't spoken to in Australia forever and a day. And oh my God, he's been on my mind. So what did I do today? I powered up my day by 1%. I just sent him a note and all it said was this: hey, Don, been thinking about you for a wee while. Hope everything's okay. Just checking in. It was 1%. I've enriched not just my experience because I feel good that I've done it, also his experience probably because of the email he's just received by me or whenever he opens it. Experience, human, enrich your life by 1% or somebody else's life by 1%. Once it's done, it's done. Next one, energy. Forget about time, focus on attention. Have you ever been skiing? Have you ever learned how to ski? What is the first thing that the ski instructor says to you? Don't look at the tree. And what's the first thing you do? Look at the tree and bang, you're over. Yeah. So attention management is the new kid off the block because we all have been taught to manage our time. And quite frankly, it's poppycock. It's too hard. Our world is too complex and time cannot be controlled by a human being. But what we focus on can. So the energy power up is literally just focusing our attention, where we place our focus, which is our energy, on something that really matters. Today, give yourself permission to power up your day energetically by 1%. That's all you need to do. And if you need a little bit of help with that one, go to the old-fashioned Eisenhower matrix, and that will help you a little bit. The penultimate one is what we call the experimental power up. And this one, again, is one that I like. And this one is, this is the edgy one, right? This is a little bit of the maverick. This is the teenager in the family of power ups. This is experimental. What does it mean? What this means is today, by 1%, I'm going to go to a place just for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes max. And I'm going to scratch an itch. And I'm not going to feel guilty about it. And there's not going to be an outcome. There's not going to be a right or a wrong, a good or a bad. I'm just going to go there and experiment and explore. And I love the experimental power up. I give myself permission to do the experimental power up once every week, at least. And more often than not, it's got something to do with going onto Google. You know, I did ChatGPT, and not last week, the week before, only gave myself 5 minutes, but I did it. And I didn't have an outcome. I didn't have a result or a target. I just went there to explore, to scratch the itch. It was beautiful. Didn't feel guilty because I had identified it as my power up for the day. And the final one is environmental. And this is something that we all should be aware of. And this is arguably, you know, the simplest for people to grab hold of. All it is how can I, just by 1%, support the planet today by making a tiny contribution? And I was with a bunch of leaders with a customer a couple of weeks ago, and it was hilarious because one of the leaders decided, we were doing a power up challenge, and one of the leaders decided that he was going to do environmental that day, and he had to walk from one building to the other building. And he's been doing this for years, right? He has been doing that walk backwards and forwards for years. First time ever, as he was doing that walk, he picked up a piece of rubbish and he put it in the bin. And he's like, oh my God, I have just powered up my day using the environmental power up. It's tiny. The key point here is tiny. Can you imagine if we were supporting human beings increasing their day by 1% only across these 5 power-ups every day, how many mountains we would be able to shift? Absolutely amazing. We could incentivize, we could reward so many different things. There is a little bit of seriousness behind these 5 power-ups as well. They are very specifically designed to align to modern mindset, the 7 dimensions of modern mindset. But instead of having to go into theory and academics with people, all we do is just get people going to the gym every morning on these 5 power-ups. And then after they've got used to it, do a retrospective and help them to understand that they've already engaged with the 7 mindsets in so many different ways. It's a beautiful enabler for them. Super, super, super easy. We also have got the unconscious part of the brain as well. So we've got that 45% of our brain that is habitual. And the most important thing really to recognize about this habitual brain is this. We don't know it because it's unconscious. We don't know it until after the fact, right? That's the whole point. And our brains are wired to habits. Our brains love habits because habits mean that as soon as your brain gets something that it thinks is a pattern, a trend, it wants to make a habit of it. It wants to create a neural pathway. And once it's made a neural pathway, it thinks that it's opening up the space for our cognition. So your brain is always wanting to support the development of habits. It's your conscious brain that doesn't like it. So you got to get over that, right? But we also have what's called a habit cycle, where we help individuals just build their habits. Now, we don't have time to be talking about how we build habits today because it's a completely, in-depth session in and of itself. But the key thing is this. Any human being at any given time can be working on up to 2 habits at any moment. So if you can imagine designing and working with humans within your system around change and transformation, where they are working on 2 habits and they're also engaging in the power-ups. And all of that is probably happening in less than 10 minutes a day, and then the rest of the time he can get on with it. Can you imagine how that could accumulate and ripple out over time? Really, really, really powerful. Micro habits and the habit cycle and the power up, that's how we accelerate. That's how small becomes beautiful, how we can accelerate change and transformation. All of this stuff, of course, is part of our certification training, is part of our framework, the Dilyn Way, for humanizing change and transformation. So just to let everybody know that there are 3 ways that you can yourself become a certified professional in the use of humanizing transformation and in modern mindset theory, because we are the home of modern mindset theory. That's where modern mindset has been authored, is part of this framework. We have a 2-day foundation course where you get into the theory, you understand the theory and become a professional in that. We also have a 2-day practitioner training workshop, which also includes an assignment and some practice hours. That means you're a practitioner, a certified practitioner, professional in the framework. And some of you who work one-to-one or one-to-few might want to engage in the mentor certification, where you learn to use our profiling tool and also understand how to design and deliver mentor and coaching training for senior leaders or for peers within the world of change and transformation in the business. So those are the 3 ways to engage with us at a professional level. And also, as I mentioned to everybody, every time I have one of these sessions is this. I try and block out some of my time. Paying it forward is really important. Everybody in our organization does pro bono work, and part of my pro bono work is always offering out to leaders one session to explore you. And given that we've been talking about you a little bit today, based on small is beautiful, then, you know, this is something that you might want to consider doing. And it's just exploring who you are now, a little bit of future mapping with you, just so that you can maximize your current practice and just have a little bit of time to reflect upon your own professional development, using and sharing some of the techniques of our framework. Okay, so got just a few minutes before we finalize today, and hopefully also just a little bit of open circle before we finish up. I just want to share one final thing. At the beginning of the day, I said I wanted to talk to you about 3 ways, 3 areas that we work with individuals and organizations on bringing small is beautiful into transformation, into the design and delivery transformation. It's you, the power of you. It's quantum in terms of working and designing through Maya and using, you know, our mental gym for powering up and habits. But also there is around this thing called singularity. And singularity is, you know, probably pretty logical to you all, but I wonder how easy it is for us to put into practice. And singularity is all around what we call first principles thinking. So hark back, if ever you were in a physics class. If you were in a physics class and you were there 13 or 14 years old, do you remember the physics teacher taking you through first principles thinking? Perhaps, perhaps not. But anyway, it comes from physics. It's a law of physics. And essentially what it is about bringing a complex problem down to its foundational elements. How can we get down to it's not root cause analysis, but it's the foundational elements of what is required for building up and designing transformation, change, or solutionizing the problem. First principles thinking. So what assumptions might we have around this? Get rid of them, get them on the wall. How can we break down this to its first principles? And then what we are able to do is we are able to design from scratch, because all we're doing is using the first principles to design and not all of this periphery stuff. And I know that there is 1 or 2 of you here on today's call from the public sector. And there's something really interesting about the public sector. We don't like letting things go. We don't like stopping things. So over the years, when we work in the world of change and transformation, we're trying to navigate change and transformation on top of layers and layers and layers and layers of old stuff of baggage. So first principles thinking is very, very powerful and very important for us to remember and to hang on to, really, really important. And first principles thinking, on the right hand side, you can see that, I don't know whether you can actually see that or not, but it does say should state, what does it say? Starlink. So that's one of the satellites of Elon Musk and SpaceX team about to launch into orbit. And this is a beautiful example. SpaceX as an organization is a beautiful example of first principles thinking, using singularity in the design of and bringing a vision of the future into reality. When Elon Musk first kind of came up with a vision and the idea of colonizing Mars, or the future of humanity, interplanetary humanity, what he did was he went and had his engineers look at NASA and look at how NASA design and deliver rockets and the old space programs. And what they realized was that the cost and complexity of building a rocket was ridiculous. I mean, the cost was somewhere in the region of 80 billion US dollars just to build a rocket. I mean, beyond sensible, but still, there you go. And the complexity huge. So at that point, probably 97% of us would walk away, but Elon Musk, being in the 3%, thought, no, we need to do something about it. From a physics background, he remembered first principles thinking, the law of first principles in physics. So he got his engineers and his designers together and he said, I want you to use this principle. And what I want you to do is I want you to break down the build and the design of a rocket to its first principles and let go of everything else. Let go of all of the complexity and all of the assumptions from NASA, from yourselves that we have, and just focus in on those first principles. And then what we will do is we will design from scratch using those first principles and nothing else. No assumptions and no complexity. And they were able to reduce the cost of the rocket by 80%. And not only that, they were able to innovate multiple components within the design in terms of engineering. That's the power of first principle thinking. And the interesting thing is that Toyota did exactly the same thing when they designed Lexus. When they designed the Lexus, they did exactly the same thing. Do you know what they did? They knew that they wanted to design a luxury car. What they did was they went out and they bought a Maserati, they bought a Porsche, they bought a BMW, they bought a Rolls Royce, every high-end luxury car that they can think of. They bought one of them and they brought them back, and they got their innovators, they got their engineers to break all those things down, to break it all down. And they got it broken down so far that they understood what the first principles were of luxury car design and making. And that's what they used to design. That's how they designed the Lexus. So it's used in different areas, but two very, very powerful examples for us. So there we go. The power of one. I guess the key thing for me is this. What we get is we get this sense of there's no longer this huge chasm of separation between business as usual and transformation. If you are able to bring a little bit of difference, future into who you are, if you're able to start thinking about Maya when you're designing change and transformation at a mass level, and if you are using first principles right at the very start in your design, what you're doing is you are bridging the gap between business as usual and transformation. And that's important, because more often than not, when we're designing transformation, we tend to do it over there and we separate it from business as usual because we don't want it to be a risk factor. We want to make sure that business as usual can actually just, keep the lights on, keep the engines oiled and running, as it were. But actually what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up for a fall further down the track. We want to, right from day one, start to close the gap between transformation and business as usual, not wait until we think the time is right, because it'll be too late. And then, of course, what that means is instead of improvement first and innovation second, we get innovation first and improvement second, which is so incredibly beautiful. There you go. I told you small was beautiful, didn't I, at the start? I always finish these Wednesday sessions with banana skins, because it's really, really important for us to recognize that in our own belief system, we might have some banana skins that will make us slip up. And the biggest banana skin here is just underestimating the power of small. Oh, but Mel, it's really tiny. It's not going to do anything. What? How? You know, how much do I need to do really? Tell me, how much do I really need to do to make a difference? No, it's not how much. It's how little you need to do to make a difference. So it's underestimating the power of small. That is the biggest banana skin that you could slip on, I promise you. And it's in terms of your own role to play in transformation, in the design of others, and just in this sense of taking how much I need to do, how much we need to do out of your narrative, and putting in what's the minimum for effective change, what's the minimum for us to shift in your narrative. Super, super, super important. There we go. We are at the end of yet another round table on humanizing transformation. I am going to stop that share button. I am going to stop talking at everybody, because that was a heck of a me at you session, wasn't it? And you can probably garner by my own energy and my own sort of, excitement around this. I can't tell you how many stories I've got of how small can accelerate transformation. It's just, you wouldn't believe it. But so many people say, we haven't got time, how are we going to be able to get this in? We need to do it later. If we are able to just bring tiny little moments into business as usual, starting with ourselves, we're already on success ladder. We're already on the journey towards transformation, which is so, so, so powerful. There you go. So open it out to the team and just ask, are there any questions? Are there any thoughts? How did you feel? Did anything out of today resonate with you?
I'll kick off.
Great.
Yeah, loads. And actually, it also makes transformation feel more achievable, rather than it being out of reach. It's the small things we're already doing that we can do. And it put me in mind of a time when I was doing a leadership program, and my coach was saying to me about one of the things I'd wanted to do was journal, right? Just so simple, but I just couldn't get into the way I'm making it a habit. And she said to me, just focus on 3 small things. So what you're grateful for, what made you smile, and where you added value. And when I was thinking about these, I was like, oh, but it didn't really add much value. And she's like, no, start with the really small things. They will all gather momentum, and then you'll soon see. So even starting small in terms of a short period of time to journal, and then small in terms of the examples I had, it's had a massive impact. So that's about a year and a half later, and you can then look back as well as looking forward on the small. So yeah, loved it, really did.
That's brilliant. Oh, thanks for sharing that, Claire. And I'm just going to bring Dawn in, because Dawn, was that not just a conversation that we actually had this morning? Oh, I think you're on mute. We can't hear you. Oh, what a shame.
No, you muted me earlier. Yeah, it's something we discussed earlier, and journaling, it's something that I've not done consistently, but I do it.
Brilliant. Fantastic. So,
and in fact, I just did a post half an hour ago on LinkedIn, so have a look at that.
We will do. There you go. That might be somebody's power up for the day. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, so really interesting. Yesterday, I did a session with one of my customers, and somebody on there, when we were talking about transformation, said that it just sounds all so overwhelming, and like, yeah, kind of does, doesn't it? This is big, but the breaking it down into the small components and actually thinking about, well, we don't want it to sound overwhelming when we put it to our people. So how do we break that down? How do we make sure it's planned and designed, and how do we step people through the process and make sure that for the ones that are a bit resistant, they've got an example they can look at that shows it working in practice. Yeah, so that was really good. And thank you very much for the reminder about power-ups. I printed off my prompt and I'm going to stick it on the wall here, Mel. So I have a daily reminder. So it's going to make power-ups a habit. There we go.
I love it. That's brilliant. And you know, Tom, there's a little. I was talking with a group of practitioners recently, and we were that one of the challenges was this whole sense of, you know, but Mel, what, you know, people are so overwhelmed when you use the word transformation, and you know, and they were they're putting all of this effort into how do we make it meaningful for people in this, that, and the other. And I said, you probably want to turn that on its head. And really, what you want to be doing is you want to be thinking to yourself, how can I make transformation insignificant? How can I make transformation so insignificant that it's easy for people to do in their day? Of course, we need to align and connect with meaning, because that drives motivation without question. It gives me a sense of belonging and attachment to the future. But actually in the design, in the daily design of transformation, we're probably looking for making it insignificant, and perhaps even removing some of this big, you know, scary or audacious language, you know, in words around transformation and the promise of the future and all of that stuff. That in itself would, you know, for the majority of people, break mire. So it's a really interesting thing. And they kind of like, they've taken that away to think about, my God, how could I make transformation insignificant for people? So, you know, that's another way of thinking about it as well. Cool. Excellent. We are a few minutes over time today, so I apologize for taking you guys just a little bit over into time, but really, really lovely to see you all. I cannot believe that we have actually had a few people joining today when I forgot to advertise it. And daylight saving has just completely and utterly, you know, got me this week. I have to self-confess that one. So thank you, everybody, for making it on today's call. And we will be sending you out the recording, if not later on today, but definitely tomorrow. And hopefully I shall be seeing you all in a fortnight's time. As Claire said, yeah, it's fortnightly. So we're ditching that weekly just to give everybody a little bit of a breather. So absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much for the comments, and loving it. So go and make transformation insignificant. See if you can do that. Woohoo! See everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.